Professor Sun is from the Ohio State University, and her research is in the NLP and also AI, particularly working on building up the benchmark LLM and also agents. And today she's gonna actually talking about this the interplay between reasoning and agents. Yes, please tell us a bit more about this.
Hi, Dr. Wang. Thank you very much for the invitation. But can you see my screen? Are you seeing the presenting screen?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, not my, the screen with the notes or things like that, right? It's the presenter mode, right?
I think it's perfect. Yeah, no problem.
Perfect. Okay, cool. All right. Let me do a little bit of adjustment here. Okay, still perfect, right?
Well, it's I don't know others, but oh yes, I think perfect. Yes, go ahead. Please.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Hi everyone. And organizers, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm quite excited to be here to talk about our recent work. And also, thank you for arranging my talk after Graham. We did a lot of related work, and in fact, part of my talk will be related to what he just talked about. Okay, so let me get started. Maybe let me see. All right, cool. So before I introduce the work we did, I want to give some special acknowledgements to students at OSU who are the lead authors of some projects I'm going to talk about in this talk. And more broadly, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to the entire OSU NLP group, led by Yusu, Sachin Kumar, and myself, for their creativity and dedication to advancing large language models and agents. So I don't think I need to introduce large language models, but to set the stage, we have been quite amazed by the recent progress of large language models and recently the so-called large reasoning models. And with LLMs getting more and more capable, they can be used to develop agentic systems that can actually do things, which can reason and plan a sequence of actions, use external tools, and take actions to lead to the state changes in the real world, and then even receive feedback from the environment to correct the mistakes made in previous steps or to inform what to do next. And an agentic system could also involve multiple agents that communicate and collaborate with each other. So here, when I say environment, the environment could be both physical, as in like physical robots, or virtual, as in web agents or mobile or OS agents. So here, in this talk, I will start with some work on web agents and also agents for science to kind of showcase the power of LM reasoning. Despite the progress in LM reasoning, I argue that there is still a more fundamental understanding of LM or agent reasoning still lacking. So in the second part of the talk, I'm going to share some of our recent findings related to transformer architecture and also test time scaling to partly answer some of the questions. So let me start with web agents, in particular, generalist web agents, which is probably what our OSU NLP group is best known for. So generalist web agent is a term we popularized in our Mind to Web paper, and you can think about it as an AI program that can follow natural language instructions and navigate the web to complete any user requested task. So in our seminal work called Mind to Web, we developed the first benchmark for training and evaluating generalist web agents. It contains a diversity of realistic tasks collected from Mechanical Turk and also use real websites. There are tasks about, say, booking a round trip on certain days, finance a, some iPhone models, for example, or follow someone like his posts on social media and so on and so forth. And here I show a series of work we have done in the direction of web agents and computer use agents. Here I want to note that let me just focus on my own work for now. And but there is a lot of awesome work from other group, including Professor Graham Newbeck's work, who just talked about earlier. So before Mind2Web, web agent works were all in the simple simulated environment with a few websites. We wanted to minimize the same to real gap and directly evaluate agents on diverse real websites. So we emphasize the so-called ecological validity in evaluation. So that's why we developed this Mind2Web benchmark. And then after that, we developed this first multimodal web agent called CACT. Basically, CACT can take a visual input, such as the screenshot of a web page at a certain stage, at a certain step to make predictions. And another major contribution of CACT is a high-quality code base for web agents. And many agent startups directly built their first demos on the CACT code base. And it has also been used by a lot of follow-up work that study agent safety. And our third work along this line is called uGround. It just got accepted to iClear as an oral paper. So this work enables a pure visual grounding method. Just use visual information to predict, to make predictions. So this is kind of reflecting our vision to do like a human-like embodiment and push, along this direction and see how far we can go. And if you look at the computer use agents like those recently from Anthropic or OpenAI, basically they adopt a similar design. So we are trying to push towards this direction. But I also heard some discussions from Graham earlier in the talk, and perhaps in the future there could be a hybrid agent that use, not just the input from the visual side, but also maybe from other modalities. But here we want to see how far we can push this vision forward. And finally, our last work is on model-based planning, which is released more recently. And it is to evaluate LLMs, the potential of LLMs as world models of the internet, and build a model-based planning framework for web agents. Currently, there is a lot of interesting projects going on in the group. I'm personally most excited by agent safety. So for now, how do we safely test agent safety risks under adversarial environments? How do we build safety guardrails for agents? So those are actively being studied in the group for now. So let me talk a little bit more about the SIGACT series. So how does the SIGACT work? There are two cognitive functions that the agent is performing internally. One is called reasoning or planning in here specifically. Basically, it generates a textual thought about what to do at a current step. So for example, thinking about the example of booking a flight, maybe, at a certain step on this web page, the agent will generate a textual thought saying that, okay, next I need to enter Columbus, Ohio as the departure city. And then there is the second stage, which is the grounding stage. It will ground the textual thought into the current environment, basically convert the textual thought into computer executable actions. For example, it needs to precisely figure out which textual field to fill and what to type in that area. We did the experiments mostly in late 2023. At that time, GPT-4V was just released. We were very impressed by the reasoning capability of that model. So for example, I'm showing you two case studies about the output of the reasoning module. And in the first example, you can see on this Best Buy website, we are asking it, like to perform a certain task. Then the model could actually output a textual plan about what to do step by step. And then in the second example, on this page, previously the model entered a invalid mobile number as shown here. And now at this step, it can see, okay, actually there is an error from the sort of the environmental feedback. And then it proposed to correct this mistake before proceeding. So we were, maybe now right now it's not as surprising because we have seen many impressive examples. But back then we were quite impressed by such results and think it holds a great potential to advance web agents. So then, next we need to move forward for grounding. As I explained earlier, just based on the textual thought, the agent cannot perform operations on the environment. And it needs to specifically figure out, okay, it is this leaving from text field. I need to, enter Columbus, Ohio. And also I needed to enter this phrase in that text field. So this is called the grounding stage. So, and also it is referring to what grounding, explains what grounding means in this web agent context. So how does the SIGKDD compare with the previous methods? So basically under this two-stage framework, we conducted an end-to-end task success evaluation in online evaluation, in online settings. So basically what that means is we sample some tasks from mind to web, and then we perform it using the agent to perform those tasks on live websites. This is what we call online evaluation, because we want to put more emphasis on online evaluation, while offline evaluation with annotated trajectories can serve as a great reference. We trust more on the online evaluation performance here because they reflect on the the complexity of real environments in real use of those agents. So we can see that under this setup, our agent can outperform the previous methods by 24% in terms of the end-to-end success rate. So despite the progress, the agent is still far from being usable yet. So after all, you can see the success rate is still less than 40% at that time. And we were intrigued by this question, then how far are we from perfect reasoning or grounding? So we did an interesting experiment that can give us a rough idea. So here we replace the auto-grounding method in SIGKDD with a human grounding method, which means basically the grounding result is always correct, provided by human annotations. And then we refer to this agent as SIGKDD Oracle. And we can see that with the Oracle grounding result, the agent can achieve very impressive performance and can pass 50% milestone. We think this is a very exciting result at that time because it means if we keep pushing the grounding performance, we can reach this milestone of 50%. But on the other hand, we also acknowledge, of course, 50% is still far from being usable in real life. So in order to, further improve the performance of a web agent, we need to work really hard to improve the reasoning capability of the agent as well. Then following the insight we got from the earlier work, more recently we conducted this this work to deliver a much better grounding method called uGround. So the secret behind uGround is to leverage the power of synthetic data. Basically, we carefully designed several strategies to synthesize data to fine-tune a state-of-the-art vision language model to do grounding. And we call this uGround. uGround stands for Universal Visual Grounding. Here, universal means it achieves state-of-the-art results on many platforms. In addition to web, it also achieves state-of-the-art results on mobile platforms and desktop platform. And more recently, some other groups also tested uGround and also reported SOTA results last month, but maybe recently it got surpassed by another more recent model. But anyway, still very strong performance on the across many benchmarks. And it is a visual only grounding. Basically, why is visual only? Is because previously in SIGKDD framework in the grounding stage, we utilize HTML for grounding. But you know, HTML is very long, noisy, and hard, inefficient to process. So we want to get rid of it. We want to sort of, like mimic how humans navigate the web, right? We humans just, see the web page and click on certain area or input in a certain area, and that's enough. So we want to see whether such information is sufficient and how to push this vision to navigate the digital world as humans do. And turns out that we can indeed get a very strong visual-only grounding method. So with this grounding method being vision only, then we can actually deliver a vision only SIGKDD framework, which we call SIGKDD here. Basically here, everything is, for both the reasoning stage and the grounding stage, the agent will just need the visual input, which is the screenshot of a web page at a certain step for prediction. And in addition to, getting rid of HTML for being efficient and easier, I think there are also implications on agent safety, because there has been a lot of work, including some of our work called environmental injection attack on agent safety, showing that basically with malicious injections into the HTML code, a web agent can be easily attacked. So my view is that with the web agent being vision only, it has a potential less risk on being attacked, or it's harder to get attacked to some extent. And you have heard me saying that, okay, SIGKDD achieved below 40% performance, and you might have also heard about the recent fancy results reported by different developers saying, okay, say operator and browser use achieve nearly close to, I guess, close to 90% accuracy on some web agent benchmark. So you might wonder, is this hype or reality? For now, I'll leave this as a question mark and encourage you to stay tuned for some more realistic evaluations coming soon. So with that, I want to mention another line of research in my group, that is to build agents for data-driven scientific discovery. So why data-driven scientific discovery, right? I think we all know that a lot of disciplines have a huge amount of data to analyze in order to draw insights and make predictions, including, say, previously published papers or some scientific data sets collected from the field, and so on and so forth. So I believe it's a great vision to use powerful AI techniques to augment human scientists, not to replace them, to augment human scientists to accelerate the discovery process. But as we know, there are many stages in scientific discovery, including literature review, hypothesis generation, experiment design, coding the specific methods, writing reports, and so on and so forth. There are so many stages. So my personal advocate is before claiming an AI scientist that can fully automate the scientific discovery process, we need to measure the progress towards that vision in each stage more rigorously. So towards that, in our recent work, we focus on coding tasks in data science. Here, I'm illustrating the, the input and output of this benchmark. So some key differences from typical coding data sets is that, so the task usually require domain-specific knowledge. So for example, the task might be, okay, train a model to classify the drug toxicity in the bioinformatics discipline. And then there's a data set for the agent to work on. More importantly, there are usually no test cases for the agent to verify the program correctness. This is very different from some competitive coding tasks. And I want to emphasize that still, when we develop this benchmark, similar to how we develop Mind2Web, we emphasize a lot on what we call ecological validity. So basically, we try to use realistic tasks that scientists really conducted when they write papers. So we extract the real-world scientific tasks from those peer-reviewed, published publications. And our tasks cover 4 disciplines, including bioinformatics, GIS, computational chemistry, and so on. And also, we further engaged with many subject matter experts to validate the tasks extracted. And during this process, we have a multi-stage quality control. We also developed some tricks to mitigate potential data contamination. And we evaluated the performance of frontier models. And here I show, some results and basically the top performing frontier models, including GPT-4o, Claude, and O1. So before the release of O1, Claude is the most impressive one in this case. And we tested under the self-debug framework and also open hands framework mentioned by Graham earlier. But O1 also achieved quite impressive performance. It can push the performance to 42% accuracy task success rate, under the self-debug framework. Because of the cost, we didn't get to test the O1 under the open hands framework. And more recently, we also compare O1 with DeepSeek R1, but here we did it on only a small scale, which is 20 tasks sampled from the dataset. So our conclusions here are highlighted in yellow. Basically, R1 indeed reaches the same level of performance, and it is much cheaper. You can see basically it's only like $0.01 US per task, in contrast to the $0.13 US for the O1. But we also note that R1 takes a longer time to think. So specifically, I used the reasoning behaviors summarized from this scaling of search and learning paper here. But all these reasoning behaviors are demonstrated by O1 and R1. But we note that R1 seems to do this self-correction for almost every problem, while O1 tends to overthink less. So this potentially is something to be further improved in the future. But despite this, overall, I think it's a very, very amazing progress. And I believe a lot of interesting research is being conducted. However, despite that, there is a lack of more fundamental understanding of LLM and agent reasoning to me personally. So now I'm going to switch gears to talk about our findings related to transformer architecture and also test time scaling to answer some of the questions. There are heated debates, right? Recently, like can LMs and transformers reason? So my personal advocate is maybe we can conduct rigorous experiments to enable nuanced analysis and understand how promising or limited are transformers for reasoning and in what ways, and avoid blanket statements. So let me introduce our work on grokking of implicit reasoning, which was accepted to NeurIPS last year. So to start with, what is implicit reasoning? Okay, so we can think about it in this way. After the model is, like knows the atomic facts, such as the single relation facts here, we hope the model to be able to infer the multi-hop query, like the wife born in, Barack Obama's wife born in, like birth date. Or for comparison, after you know the age attribute values, and you can, like predict the younger here, one person is younger than the other. So here, by implicit reasoning, we mean we want the model to directly predict the answer without verbalizing any chain of thought rationale. So it sort of, you can think about it, letting the model think internally without verbalizing the intermediate steps. Okay, so CUT is all the rage right now. So why does the implicit reasoning matter? I want to argue that from the following perspective. First, basically that's the default mode of large scale training or pre-training most of the time. No COT is required or available, and actually creating COT rationales for training might be very costly, as also mentioned in Hannah's talk yesterday. And more fundamentally, I think this determines how well LLMs acquire structured representations of facts and rules from data. And I believe if a model can think internally, it is potentially more powerful to compress and integrate information at scale. So recent work has reported LLM's limitations in implicit reasoning. For example, some work saying, okay, there is substantial evidence in first hop reasoning, but not so much in the second hop. And also the compositionality gap does not decrease with the model scale increases. And also some latest models at that time struggle at implicitly comparing entity attributes despite knowing them perfectly. So we got intrigued by such results and want to understand why. So we embarked a journey to answer the following questions. So can transformers learn to reason implicitly? Or are there actually fundamental limitations that prohibit the acquisition of this skill? What factors play a role in acquiring this skill? So is it a data skill, distribution, or model architecture? Here, let me first clarify the setup. On this slide, you don't need to, pay attention to the details except that we are just using a standard GPT-2 kind of transformer architecture with 8 layers. You will later see 8, the number 8, in the later slides. So perhaps have an impression of the 8 layers here. But we also did a lot of experiments using other model skills, and we found consistent results. So, okay, the data setup is very interesting. We use the synthetic data set for clean, controlled study so that we can draw rigorous conclusions. But let me say, explain how we set up the data. Basically, in our data set, we have 2 kinds of facts. One is called atomic facts. The other is called inferred facts. So atomic facts, you can just think of them as a knowledge graph, where each edge here, each single relation here, single relation tuple is just an atomic fact. You cannot further break it down anymore. But for inferred facts, you can think about them as multi-hop compositions of those atomic facts. Here we focus on 2-hop. So for example, combining this mother relation and the place of birth, the model is supposed to be able to answer Wender's mother's place of birth is Alabama. Okay, so that's what we call inferred facts. Okay, so this part is very interesting, a little bit complex. So let me explain a little bit slowly. The goal for the model is to be able to induce and apply the latent rules. So in order for it to be able to induce the latent rules, we provide a mixture of atomic facts and also the inferred facts during training. So we hope the model during training can be able to learn those latent rules, like how to apply those atomic facts to derive the multi-hop facts. So now, given a new unseen inferred query, like a multi-hop query, we hope the model can, at the test time, apply the learned rules and answer this new multi-hop query correctly. Okay, so that's the high-level idea. But what's more interesting here is we have an OD and ID and OOD settings, basically in distribution and out of distribution settings. So what that means is basically we split all the atomic facts into 2 sets. One is for the ID setting, the other is for the OOD setting. So basically, for the atomic facts used for ID setting, we are going to do all the compositions for all the atomic facts in this set, and then partition the inferred facts into training and test. So in this test set, we call it ID test set. And for the other atomic fact sets, we are going to do the combinations for the atomic facts in this set, and those inferred facts will be called a test OOD set. So basically, you can think of this way. If a multi-hop query, let's say HR1, R2 is in the ID set, it means that the involved atomic facts have been seen combined with the other atomic facts during training. But if this multi-hop query is in the OOD setting, those atomic facts are observed in training, but their combinations with any other fact have not been observed in training. Okay, so this is something to be understood carefully. Okay, so this is how we set up the ID and OOD. And then we train this model on the training set and then test the ID performance and OOD performance. For now, let's first look at the green curve here. For both tasks, we observe that the model can achieve perfect ID generalization performance. All right, but after an extended training period beyond overfitting. So for both tasks, as you can see, overfitting roughly happens here, which means that the model obtains perfect training performance at this point. But it needs to be optimized for way more steps in order for the ID generalization to catch up and reach its perfect performance. Okay, this basically extended period is what we call grokking, and it's consistent with the literature. Okay, then the second finding here is, let's look at the blue curve here. And we observe that for composition task, actually transformers does not achieve OOD generalization. You can see the OOD generalization performance never went up. But for comparison, it catches up and reaches a perfect performance. And we also find that the generalization speed does not have any relation to the absolute data size, but more related to the critical data distribution. Specifically, the ratio between the inferred facts and atomic facts correlate with the generalization speed. So basically, you can see the higher the ratio, the generalization speed can be faster. And this seems to be in contrast with what the previous work seems to suggest. They say, there is a notion of critical data size when explaining, the grokking phenomenon. But here we think that it is actually the ratio between inferred facts and atomic facts that matter more. So these are very intriguing results to us, but there are still some more important questions that remain, and we hope to understand more. So what happens during grokking, and why does grokking happen, and why does the level of generalization vary across different tasks? So these require us to perform more analysis to analyze the inner workings during grokking. So basically, in this part, we use some standard techniques from the mechanistic interpretability literature called logit lens and also causal tracing. So basically, logit lens, for example, if we want to understand what token in the input vocabulary this hidden state represents, we can use logit lens to do sort of a projection into the input space and see, okay, actually say this token R1 here is among the largest components. And we was regard, okay, basically this hidden state represents R1 relation. So this is the high level idea there. And causal tracing aims to measure the causal strength between a hidden state and another state, basically. So here we measure the causal strength between, let's say, the hidden state of R1 at layer 4 and the target prediction T. So the way we do this is during the normal run, we just, input the normal query and then make the prediction, which is a final prediction T here. And we did this after basically overfitting. So the model can always predict the target T here. But then we also perform the perturbed run, which is, let's say, we replace R1 with a randomly sampled entity, R1 prime, and then we go through the network and get the hidden representation of R1 prime, and use that to replace the hidden representation of R1 during the normal run, and see how this change will affect the final prediction. And we do this many times by sampling many different random entities and see how often this final prediction will be changed. So basically, this is used to measure the causal strength between this hidden state and the final prediction. So this is sort of the background and idea. And after that, you can regard basically this whole neural network is a computational graph propagating information from input to output. And based on the causal strength, we can actually prune those edges with very weak connections. And after grokking or at the end of grokking, we do this mechanistic analysis over the checking point, the model checkpoint at that time. And we found this what we call generalizing circuit for these two tasks. So let me walk you through this. This is very interesting to us. So for the composition, this generalizing circuit looks like this. Basically, it looks like a sequential or staged circuit where you can see from the first 4 layers, the model tries to retrieve the fact for the first hop. Okay, and then for the last 4 layers, the model tries to retrieve the fact for the second hop. But the circuit for the comparison task looks very different. So for the first 4 layers, basically, the lower layers, the model tries to retrieve the attribute levels for these 2 entities at the same time in parallel. That's why we call this a parallel circuit. And then in the upper layers, the model tries to do the comparison operation and get the conclusion whether E1 is larger, smaller, or equal to this. And we also, check what input token each hidden state represents through logic lens. And we find that basically this hidden representation indeed represents the token B, which is the bridge entity, the bridge entity, which is the tail entity of HR1. And also this hidden representation represents the relation R2. Basically, R2 relation is indeed preserved, and the second hop, the upper layers, is indeed doing the second hop knowledge retrieval. We want to dive into details like what happens during grokking and why this generalizing circuit forms during this process. So we have been doing a similar analysis for many checkpoints during this grokking period and track the causal connection strength, between the hidden state and the target prediction. This is what these figures are showing. Basically, this is a causal length between a hidden state, say this hidden state, and the final prediction at the start of grokking. And this is at the end of grokking. And the difference between the two will be referred as the change in terms of causal strength during grokking. And at the same time, we are also tracking the token representation of the hidden state of R1, the first relation at the Mendel layer, layer 5, and also the hidden representation of R2 at the layer 5. And the way to do that is basically we do it through logical lens and then check the rank of the bridge entity and also the relation R2 in those components. So these figures are pretty dense, so let me just summarize the interesting messages here. First, we observe the causal connection between the hidden state of R1 at layer 5 and the final prediction grows significantly. You can see the change here is very significant during this grokking period. And also, another interesting thing is you can see the R2 component for this hidden state representation of R2 at layer 5 is gradually emerging. So that means the R2 relation is getting preserved during this grokking period. And also another thing to note is that the hidden state of R1 at the Mendel layer is always the bridge entity during this grokking period. That means the atomic effects have already been memorized before overfitting. So this bridge entity has always been there, but it's just their causal strength between this bridge entity and the final prediction getting stronger and stronger. And also, based on this evidence, we think that it suggests that the model gradually forms the second hop in the upper layers during this grokking period. And before grokking, basically the model is very likely to just doing memorization, which is to directly associate the two-hop query with the target entity. Okay, so why grokking happens? And we provided a view of circuit efficiency. Basically, we think there is a memorizing circuit that forms at the point of overfitting. As I explained, basically directly associates the two-hop query with the target prediction without going through the intermediate steps. But the generalizing circuit forms during grokking and outrepeats this memorizing circuit. So why does it form? Why does it outrepeat a memorizing circuit? This is because during optimization, the model is incentivized to be more efficient and transition from memorizing to generalizing. And we can understand this efficiency from the perspective of, okay, the number of facts need to be stored by memorizing versus generalizing circuits. For generalizing circuit, the number of facts needed to be stored is much fewer than the memorizing circuit. And also we can understand it from this optimizing weight decay during grokking. Basically, we observe that during the grokking period, after the model achieves say the perfect training performance, the model starts to optimize the weight decay term, where the weight term is getting substantially smaller during this grokking period. Basically, the model tries to find smaller ways to maintain the same training accuracy. Okay, So then why isn't OOD generalization always achieved for these two tasks? So going back to this circuit, we can see that for composition, in the upper layers, the model needs to retrieve the second hop fact, right? But for OOD test set, those second hop facts are never appeared, never, like same as the second hop during training. And so the model does not have any incentive to save a second copy of those, second hop facts during training. So that's why we think for composition, it never appears OOD generalization. But more fundamentally, this is due to the non-recurrent design of transformer architecture, which prevents memory sharing across layers. So we also did a small experiment where we basically just share parameters across the, let the first 4 layers and the last 4 layers share the same parameters and do the training again. And we see substantial improvements of the OOD generalization, but we were not able to wait for it to grog or generate achieve perfect performance. But we think that this can sort of unlock this OOD generalization performance. But this is just one way. Potentially, there are other ways to improve the architecture. Okay, I know I'm over time, so let me just mention very briefly about the test time scaling, because I think we had some very interesting results about rigorous analysis, like how and when those advanced test time scaling strategies can help. It has got a lot of attention recently, especially after the release of O1, and there are also speculations of O1. I personally benefited a lot from the tutorial by Sasha Rush, and where he summarized a few possible frameworks or paradigms for doing test time scaling. But all these paradigms, as you can see, they require a verifier in the loop and to, for example, check the generated responses or provide reward or value for the generation process and so on. So in our earlier work, we did a more thorough analysis about the impact of verifiers' performance on those different scaling strategies. In that paper, we provided an agent perspective to explain different test time scaling strategies. And in fact, we use the planning methods, the term planning method, but this is the same as test time scaling strategies. Basically, you can think about it as there is a generator and there is a discriminator, and your generator can generate some partial or a full response, and the discriminator can provide a score. Sometimes use some observation from the environment, for example, the code interpreter, and then depending on how the generator and the discriminator interact with each other, we can have different scaling strategies. So the different scaling strategies analyzed in our paper, including re-ranking, which is similar to best of n, and iterative correction, which is similar to self-correction, basically, and also Monte Carlo tree search there. So the main conclusion there is we did some simulation experiments with Oracle rewards, and also by adding noise, we can simulate how good the verification signal is. But the conclusion here is the verifier has to be highly accurate in order for those more complex scaling strategies, such as iterative correction and tree search, to outperform the simpler method like re-ranking, and sometimes even to beat the big greedy search. So this is a high-level conclusion, and highly accurate in our experiments means basically the verifier's performance needs to be around 90% accuracy in determining what is correct and what is wrong. And then also another issue I need to point out is that for those complex scaling strategies, and there is a challenge in balancing accuracy and efficiency. And in our experiments, we find that for example, complex method like tree search can really cost a lot more time when when using it at inference time. Okay, so sorry for the rush for the second part, the last part, but let me conclude with some open questions here. Regarding the reasoning capability, we have been thinking about how to build a good world model for web agents and maybe for other agents later as well, and how to improve verifiers' performance especially for problems with of course, no verification, no gold verification signal or rule-based verification signal. And how does the reasoning capability impact agent safety? This seems like a paradox to me, because when the LM becomes better at reasoning, it might be able to identify the safety risks itself. But on the other hand, when the model becomes like a very strong reasoning, once it is broken, once it gets misled, it can really perform the malicious goal very well. So for those weaker LMs, even if they get misled, they might not be able to complete the malicious goal. So this seems like a very interesting, and there seems to be a balance, but also sounds like a paradox to me. And also, I'm very interested in further advancing the fundamental understanding of LM and agent reasoning. So basically, I didn't get a chance to talk about, but through implicit reasoning, transformers still cannot do step generalization. So for example, you train transformers on 2-hop queries and you wanted to do 3-hop or even more. So that cannot be achieved. You can also understand this through the circuit I showed earlier. But can COT help? Can we design some COT rationales to help it achieve better generalization? And in what ways? And then the aha moment in DeepSeek R1 has attracted a lot of attention and discussion. So, but can there be a clean controlled setup to rigorously study this aha moment, and how the RL help the reasoning behaviors appear in this RL phase? Anyway, so those are very intriguing questions to me that we are currently trying to spend some time on. With that, thank you so much, and sorry for the extended discussion here.
Thanks, Professor Sun. And do we have any questions from the audience?
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your excellent talk. I knew you already developed multiple awesome agents for web applications. So I'm curious, what's your opinion of the difference between language only agents and vision-only agent for web applications? Actually, you developed both, right? So
Yeah.
Which kind of direction do you prefer? And what's your opinion about it?
I prefer the vision only between these two. I really hate the HTML. As I mentioned several aspects actually. So first, HTML is very lengthy and very noisy, and it's hard to process, and perhaps if you really incorporate it at inference time, and it will be you potentially will have a latency, like a longer response time from the agent. But on the other hand, I also mentioned the safety aspect. Like with HTML code, potentially some attackers can inject some malicious content into the HTML, and there has been some studies around that. And so it just makes the attack surfaces much broader than the vision only. So because of these two aspects, I currently prefer the vision only, web agent. But I also understand understand maybe as we evolve, there could be, maybe on the safety side, there could be some guardrails, or, there could be some more advanced approaches that make hybrid web agent that use multiple modalities. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And my second question is that I really like the idea from your side. You mentioned that you want to test the agents on the real online websites, right? So I'm curious. Is that possible to train the agent on the real websites?
Oh, you mean like training? That will be, I think it's possible, but very challenging, right? The skill of the training data, and also, you really need to, so one challenge in online evaluation with real websites is you need to sort of have some humans in the loop in order to prevent some state changing consequential actions on the website, right? You don't really want the agent to perform some action that cause damages to the website or cause damages to the user. So I feel that's why online evaluation currently is performed at a relatively smaller scale, because we always have humans in the loop. And if you think about doing this in the training time, I feel there has to be some automatic sort of safety monitors in the loop actually we have some ongoing work on safety monitors, but I think that is still a bit far from being usable together with the training phase. This is a very interesting idea. Perhaps maybe in real development we can have the agent interact with the websites, but try to be more sample efficient. That this makes sense. Like just interact with this, website you are interested in working on in a small scale, and to mitigate the safety risks there. I think that could be, a viable approach.
Thank you for your answers. Thank you so much. Thank you for your excellent talks.
Okay. Do we have one more question from the audience? Can I ask one question? You have this the experiment on this understanding what's going on in this transformer. So that reminds me this work done a few years back about the information bottleneck to understand this deep learning kind of thing. So is that the transformer have something like different to these, like a previous analysis or this deep learning neural network?
Some differences, right? Can you remind me of the bottleneck, information bottleneck conclusion?
Yeah.
And stuff?
So maybe you can Google. There's a paper called information bottleneck. Deep learning. I think the idea about this is about compression and decoding. So basically, whole neural network is they try to do sort of compress the data and then eventually decode it, and then they check in the whole learning process and show that in fact indeed the case.
I remember that. Yeah, I think probably we'll also discuss that. But I mentioned, like why we are so interested in implicit reasoning is because if you think about it, you give the model a mixture of atomic facts and inferred facts, basically a lot of information. We hope the model to sort of compress the information and being able to integrate the information in some way and to derive new information, right? I think from that perspective, yes, we did discuss the findings from the compression and the integration perspective. I think it's connected. But specifically here, we are trying to understand how transformer architecture is doing that or is not doing that in some cases. So I think we are trying to provide some concrete evidence or through experiments, controlled experiments, saying that to what degree it is doing information integration or compression, and in what scenarios it is not integrating information very well, and why.
Yes, and then how this for example, if we change this objective, for example, if you make use of like reinforcement learning as sort of a learning paradigm rather than predict next token, minimize error. I'm not sure whether you can draw the same conclusion or not. So I think it will be very interesting to really further investigate that, right?
Exactly. Yes. In fact, after I read the R1 report, I immediately connected this with the, like our setup, our problem setup with their training paradigm. Like first, okay, you have a base model, and then you do RL, and then somehow in this process, more reasoning behaviors were shown during this phase. But of course, there are some hypotheses. But I'm also interested in, that's also what I mentioned in the last question. Basically, have a reasoning behavior learned, in this process.
Yeah. I think it will be very interesting. And this to have this scaling down computation, like when you generate some intermediate steps until you give the answer, perhaps that's the way to generalize. I don't know, given the question, sort of generate intermediate step, the reasoning step, and that's the way to that kind of given the question to the intermediate hidden state. And then it's a way to generalize across multiple tasks.
Multi-hop tasks. In fact, we so in this paper, we were focusing on implicit reasoning, right? No intermediate step are generated. But more recently, we have been conducting some follow-up work where we prepare some COT rationales. Like we instruct the model to first not just instruct, but fine-tune the model to generate intermediate step and then predict the final answer, something like that. So basically show how COT rationales, basically SFT with the COT rationales can help generalization. So the finding there is it can indeed help step generalization by a lot, but still not perfect. For example, maybe you train the model on 27 hop, it can maybe generalize to 30, 35 kind of thing, but beyond that it will fail. So there is some kind of a generalization to a certain portion, but not very far. And going beyond that, maybe we can explore like how RL can help in this way, like whether RL can make the generalization further.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Do we have a maybe last question from the audience, if any? Okay, even though thanks Professor Sun to give us the very exciting, very interesting talk, and we will come back maybe in 2 weeks, and where we have an extra session. We have an invited speakers from industry. So we'll see what they do, in their industry environment, and we can have discussion. All right.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much. For the invitation. Bye.
Bye.